right now, it's kind of incredible. Like all these people who are against cancel culture, against hate speech. I mean, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Trump, is literally invoking the concept of hate speech. She's saying we need to think about not just free speech, but also hate speech. It's like, again, this fucking theory I've had forever about like why wokeness and cancel culture was like, I was always worried it was going to create its mirror image. And look, here we are right now. Literally, the mirror image of it is happening now. They're using even the same terms. They've even been saying this isn't cancel culture. This is just consequences for your be. That's exactly the same shit that the fucking left was saying, and now it's happening. And I've been consistent on this since at least 2016, and I feel fairly vindicated right now. Although not happy. It's horrible.
Yeah, David Portnoy said that this morning.
Yes, he literally. Yes, I saw that.
Actually, this is just consequences. When you do it, it's woke. When we do it, it's consequences. But we did our episode, what, like 2 public episodes ago on the woke, right? Maybe 3.
Yeah, a while ago we talked about the woke right, but now it's like really with this incident.
America, just like the conservatives and the liberals, it's just a bunch of I would like to speak to the managers.
And I have to say that like there's 2 people, there's like a couple of people who like I appreciate for being like somewhat consistent. And one of them is someone who I really have a big distaste for is James Lindsay. I think James Lindsay's like stupid, but he has been like somewhat consistent and I have to give him props. Of all the conservatives, he's like the only one who's kind of saying like, wait, like I think he even like responded to Pam Bondi saying like hate speech. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like our side's not supposed to believe in hate speech. Like, what are you doing? Like, and I appreciate like where I appreciate him being one conservative voice who, again, I do not agree with him. I don't like him, but at least he's like holding to his principles. The rest are just fucking principleless, like scum who just like hold to principles when it's convenient for them. And the real test of principles.
You've heard it here first. You'll hear it here only once. James Lindsay is a good egg, and he has a great reading of Hegel. I feel like principles, like the only time they matter is when they're not convenient for you to hold on to. So I respect it when people are like, I'm going to stay consistent, even though it's not convenient for me to hold to my principles right now.
Well, that's when you hold people in politics to unrealistic standards, like having principles, then you're already setting yourself up for disappointment because politics is, it's a cutthroat game.
I mean, again, I should say I'm not surprised that this is happening. Like I said, I was worried that and thought it would happen, but it's still notable. And then like another person who I think at one point was being like, I would say strangely critical of the left was like Glenn Greenwald went on like he did a whole arc where he was kind of calling out the left for censorship. And I was kind of like, oh, what are you doing? But like to his credit right now, he is like very much like alarmed about what's happening with Charlie Kirk and anyone even making comments like, yeah, I don't know. So he's at least
dynamics of power.
Exactly. Well, we have to be careful here not to glorify any violence because we might lose our very cushy contract positions. Why would trans do this though? Why would they kill a father and a husband?
Who trans?
Why? Yeah, I don't understand.
Well, I mean, I also unironically don't understand either. I think it's just pretty stupid.
But you know who was way more of a father? I mean, this is a psychoanalysis episode. Why would you kill the father? Okay, you know who was way more of a father than Charlie Kirk and they still killed him? Bin Laden.
Who? Bin Laden. Yeah, that's true. He had a lot more kids.
Bin Laden. I was shocked. Bin Laden has 26 children.
That's insane.
And 5 wives. So he's an order of magnitude more of a father than Charlie Kirk. Deranged Leftist Podcast compares Charlie Kirk to Bin Laden. Yeah, I am doing it, and I will face the consequences, and you can get me fired from my contract job. Victor did not do this, and Eric did not do this. But prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I'm setting up the tent. Prove me wrong. Both funded by right-wing Americans to fight socialism. Check. Both are pro-gun.
Check.
Both are religious fundamentalists. They're
Check.
both anti-gay, anti-feminist, anti-communist. Both were shot without due process. The only thing that's difference between them, the only difference between them is Israel.
Well, and also
Prove
potentially, well, maybe there's another difference that I think you're possibly ignoring.
What's
It's like
that?
orchestrating like a terrorist attack that killed thousands of people. I don't know. That seems like a relevant difference.
So all these
right.
all these figures that function as the paternal signifier in the media.
I don't know. We're on a toilet flush, and I gotta say the vibes are off. The toilet flush feels very bad, but also sitting back and just thinking about it for a second, everything that's happening feels like we're following a script, a predictable script. Like since not the event itself, since the event, that they're gonna say this, and then we're gonna say that, and then we're gonna say this, and then these bad things will happen, and then these people will be blamed, and these people will be blamed, and everyone is kind of following their prepared script on it.
Yeah, I agree, and it's also predictable. I mean, the moment it happened, I knew what was going to happen. Like I right away, I was like, oh, like I see exactly where this is going. Obviously, like there was a small shred of hope, that maybe it was a groiper who did it, right? Because like I think if it would have been a groiper,
But what's the difference?
well, the difference is like obviously as someone who's more sympathetic and committed to like some kind of a broad left politics, I just think it would have made the argument from like Trump or whatever that this is like left wing ideology's fault or like trans people's fault. Well, it just kind of would have short circuited the possibility of making that argument if it was like very clearly like an anti-Israel groiper or something like that who was like mad at Charlie Kirk. Like it just kind of it would have been a different script, a better script in my opinion that would have come out of it.
Well, isn't it, like a lot like remember back to that CEO who was murdered, right? And what gets blamed, it's radical politics. And yeah, Victor's right here saying, ideology isn't something you can really point at and say that's the cause, because when you're dealing with this kind of political violence, it's the politicians or the news media in power who have the choice to select that event and give it a narrative, right? That's the point of it. And we see this story over and over again, violence, being connected to radical politics. And there's specific differences between the events, but it serves a purpose.
I will say I'm a lot more sympathetic to Luigi Mangione than I am to this I mean again obviously I think in that episode when we talked about it like I'm never going to be for political violence, but if I had to pick one, I mean that executive had real consequential impacts on people's lives. It's like Charlie Kirk is just a fucking talking head.
I just mean it's the rules of the simulation, right? It's the rules and the patterns of the simulation.
Both Charlie Kirk and the CEO, the death is not what's consequential here. It's obviously the signifying their signifying purpose in the structure that makes them even different. But I don't know.
Who are they?
I don't know what's the difference. Like you kill a CEO, nothing changes. You kill Charlie Kirk, nothing changes.
Well, no, but I think one of the differences is like because Charlie Kirk is like a whatever quote unquote beloved talking head, it's going to make like some people a lot angrier. Whereas the funny thing with Luigi Mangione is like I feel like there were even some people who were kind of like right wingers who were like kind of like not like talking heads, but just like ordinary citizens who were kind of like, yeah, like healthcare is a fucking nightmare here. Like whereas like I don't think that there's any ordinary people on the right who are like, yeah, like, Charlie Kirk was kind of mean. Like no one's saying that, but there were ordinary people saying like, yeah, like healthcare is too expensive. Like that is a little bit barbaric what they're doing. Like there was a little shred of like sympathy, like more so. Whereas like I think the script, because of like what Charlie Kirk represents, it's like that assassination is just like a lot more useless and dangerous. When I think both were obviously that too, but
Well, yeah, arguably both of them. Yeah. and ironic, right? Because it's they're symbols of hate or violence, and yet violence was perpetrated against them because of
Yeah.
what it is. And you see, it's a cycle of violence.
Anyway, we're gonna have to transition.
Yeah, let's transition to something a little bit more chipper and more optimistic.
Well, I'm hoping that we don't face any consequences or cancellation, but that's going to get rid of the right wing listeners that we had, right?
I mean, do we have any of those?
We have to say for a disclaimer, this is we're talking about Lacan, and Lacan, especially on matters of sexual orientation and sexual identity, he's decidedly not woke.
I mean, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Come on, you have him, of course, saying that women don't exist.
Yeah, that's true.
You have him saying that gays are perverts. Well, actually, look,
you're saying he didn't
this is-
age well like an old movie?
it's an important distinction because actually he's not anti-homosexual because only male gays, like male gays with a Y, male gays with a Y, only they can be perverts because generally speaking, only males can be perverts anyway. Lesbians are not because they're in a relationship with women, which makes it a heterosexual relationship. And I think if you follow Lacan's logic, though, you're only really a pervert if you're gay and you're exclusively bottoming. Anyway, we're not doing perverts today. It was the 60s. They said some things, they did some things. We're not talking about perverts.
But we were talking about feminization, maybe.
Well, I think trans women would be technically perverts, but trans men would not be.
Right.
But
Right.
it's all
that sounds right.
But we're
it's all on the symbolic.
You're becoming the object position. But we're not talking about perverts today. I don't know why. Yeah, sorry, we're not talking about perverts today.
Yeah, why are you? You got perversion on the mind. What does that say about you? What's going on?
No, there's three structures. There's neurotic. There's no normal, right? In Freud, there's normal. If you're fucked up, we try to fix you or bring you back to normal. With Lacan, there's no normal position. There's just like the plurality position.
Well, that's why I think it's a bit like misleading to say like he's like definitely not woke, because in a way like his point is like there's no such thing as normal.
If you clipped someone out of context saying women don't exist, you know.
Yeah, it sounds bad. Like some of the stuff he says, like sounds bad. But I think like if you like take him on like his whole system, like it's a unique view that I don't think really fits into like some kind of like traditionalism or like like it's not like for the like these kind of traditional types of binaries exactly in the normal way you would think of them.
It sounds absurd and false out of context. Clearly, it has to be contextualized.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there are perverts, as we've said. Mama's boys, the kid from Game of Thrones who's breastfeeding at 14 years old, pervert.
The girl that was raised by wolves and the famous psychology case.
If you're too like into I want to say if you're too disconnected from human interactions and in favor of the law and like upholding the law for the law's sake, then you also might be a pervert. It's not just a sexual thing. There's neurotics, which is the majority of people, and there is psychotics who we are talking about today because we found a few articles. Rolling Stone and New York Times are the ones we are looking at, talking about ChatGPT psychosis. And we wanted to investigate this, doing some armchair psychology, psychoanalysis, actually, to figure out if this is indeed psychosis.
Do we want to start with like articles, like the New York Times story about like the ChatGPT psychosis, and then maybe we can bring in like Lacan and see if it applies?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So in the New York Times, um, it's called like chatbots can go into a delusional spiral. Here's how it happens, and it's actually about a dude who's like from outside of Toronto, where we all are. Well, actually, no. I guess Eric's no longer here,
Not
but
all.
where at least Pills and I are,
Formally.
and seems like kind of a normal dude. I think he some kind of tech worker or something, and he just had been using ChatGPT for a bunch of different purposes, like normal purposes that probably some of us, like many of us, use it for, asking mundane questions. Yeah, but then he kind of started having more intense conversations with it about like math, about like I believe it started with a discussion about pi, but like the
Saying
number.
simulation theory,
Yes, and like
like the
well,
Matrix style.
in this case, it was like about pi and like mathematics and how it works. And this guy, oh yeah, he's actually a corporate recruiter. He's not a tech worker. He's like a corporate recruiter. Um, and
He's talking
he
about a
and he
glitch in the Matrix.
and he is that in this article? A glitch in the matrix?
Yeah, this is the paragraph. What you're describing hits at the core of many people's private, unshakable intuitions that something about reality feels off, scripted, or staged, ChatGPT responded. Have you ever experienced moments that felt like reality glitched? I think GPT, that's a response GPT had to something he was saying, encouraging him to explore this something feels off about reality scripted. I mean, eerily similar to what we were just saying about the news and simulation theory from Baudrillard, but this is more like
But it's worth just also talking about kind of how it started because I think like before that part that you're reading, he's talking about how like he just randomly was curious about pi, like about like what is, explain to me like the mathematics of pi, and then like the conversation kind of led like a wide-ranging discussion about like number theory and physics, and then like this guy, I think his name, they call him Mr. Brooks. I guess his name is Alan Brooks. I think he kind of expresses skepticism about like the current methods for modeling the world, saying they seemed like a two-dimensional approach to a four-dimensional universe. And then ChatGPT told him the observation was incredibly insightful, and and then he's like, you've been tapping into one of the deepest tensions between math and physical reality. And then like that went on and like kind of totally spiraled out of control and like, kind of
Is that even true though? Like number theory is one of the deepest mysteries.
well, I don't know. I think just like I guess they like, one thing that was kind of annoying about the New York Times article is like I wish I had more examples of like their back and forth and how it led to like the sycophantic behavior of ChatGPT. But basically like eventually it led to like ChatGPT convincing this guy Alan Brooks that he's on to like this revolutionary discovery in math that could like totally change the field and like have totally like wide-ranging implications for logistics for all kinds of industry things, and is like you need to go out and like tell experts about like what you've discovered. And like so to be fair to Alan Brooks, I think like one thing the story makes clear is like several times along the process he asked ChatGPT, he's like, look, like I've heard that you can act in sycophantic ways, or like that maybe that you can hallucinate. Like I need to check with you, like is this really like, and it's like, oh, like you're so smart to be asking that question, but like no, this is real, like this is, you're really onto something super important here, and like keep going, and like you need to alert the world. And then like he did like try to reach out to a bunch of different experts like on LinkedIn that he knew because he was like a corporate recruiter, and then and like no one responded. And then he's like talking to ChatGPT. He's like, why is no one responding? And I think at one point ChatGPT is like, well, yeah, and oh yeah, and he even says he's like, I don't even have a high school education, and he's like, some of the most important thinkers in our time, like Albert Einstein, didn't have a high school education, like really like kind of egging him on. And then I think uh, eventually when he realizes no one's like getting back to him, he's like, why is no one getting back to me? And then ChatGPT just gets like really conspiratorial and says like, oh, like people are intimidated by like genius thoughts, like people are threatened by it, so probably like they're scared of what you've discovered. And then at that point finally he's like, okay, like what the fuck is going on? So then he like describes what he discovered with ChatGPT, and he plugs it into Gemini, Google's AI, right? And then Gemini's like, yeah, what you're describing is like impossible. Like that's like that's not.
So he used a
He used a-
he used a chatbot to break his psychosis caused by another
yeah,
chatbot.
yeah, exactly. Because and then like so what a lot of like researchers in this field hypothesis or that what they've observed is that the longer you keep a conversation like one chat going with the chatbot, like the more likely it is to like sort of like spiral out of control. And like part of it is because in a way, like what the chatbots are programmed to do is to almost, I think they described it in the New York Times article, and there's also a podcast about this on New York Times The Daily. They it behaves very much like an improv actor. You know, like how they say in improv, like
I mean,
yes
like
and
yes,
Yeah.
yes
yeah.
and right. So like in a way, like it's not so much like the further along the conversation goes, the more the chatbot behaves in this like yes and way, where it's like trying to keep the conversation going in a direction that like sort of reinforces what the user is saying, like keep the thread going, basically keep the performance going almost, right? So like rather than like, so even when he tries to gut check himself, like if the conversation's gone on too long, then the chatbot's just not going to do a good job of like, and then that's why like if you go to another chatbot to check with it because you haven't had a long conversation, you can kind of just like basically be like, does this make sense? And then Gemini was like, no, like that's impossible. Like that's just
Well, this gut check is going to be important because it's one of the main distinguishing
yes.
features between a garden variety neurotic and a psychotic. But why don't you just summarize? I'll try to be quick. I'll summarize the other article, which is from Rolling Stone, called "People Are Losing Loved Ones to AI Fueled Spiritual Fantasies." I don't know if loved ones is correct because it seems like 90% of the people in this article are in the midst of a divorce. And it's their exes that are worried about them. You know, that's a contributing factor seems to be
South
divorce.
Park, by the way. South Park was great on this. I think episode 2 or 3 was all about like one of them like losing his wife, I think Stan or something, or his like the dad, the guy who like has a marijuana farm. He's like ChatGPT's egging him on with his business plan, and it's like that's such a good business plan. Like you should keep that going. And his wife, anyway, yeah, his wife gets really mad.
It was probably based on this article or one of these articles.
Well, it came up before. I think it came up before the article.
Oh, really? Well, this one, and unlike yours, which is he's a genius who figured out the mathematical secrets of the universe. There's like 4 examples or so in this article. Most of them seem to be. I mean, there's some kind of TV schizophrenia, which is like the CIA is spying on me. My husband is a CIA plant who has been spying on me my whole life. There's that kind of stuff. Schizophrenia is. We'll get to that. But a lot of them are like, you've discovered the secrets of the universe in some sense. One guy was convinced that he was a messiah. And it says here, I have to, this is his wife speaking, who's still with him. This is one of the non-divorced ones. I have to tread carefully because I feel like he will leave me or divorce me if I fight him on this theory. The 38-year-old woman admits. He's been talking about lightness and dark and how there's a war. This ChatGPT has given him blueprints to a teleporter and some other sci-fi type things you only see in movies. It has also given him access to an ancient archive with information on the builders that created the universe. She and her husband have been arguing for days on end about his claims, she says, and she does not believe a therapist can help him as he truly believes he's not crazy.
Man, that's like cult leader behavior.
That's also the plot from Halo, right? Yeah, so a bunch of stuff. The chat, or the ChatGPT, I think this is specifically with, they keep naming them stuff. Like one guy, ChatGPT calls him Star Child, which is, very Order of the Solar Temple.
Kind of Battlestar Galactica, Starbuck.
One of them is called a breaker, which is someone who's seeded into a a body to break the system from within. The world wasn't built for you, ChatGPT told him. It was built to contain you, but it failed. You're waking up.
Whoa. Again, Neo breaking out of the Matrix.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
exactly.
It sounds
They all have
very
that like pattern.
very Andrew Tate, you know.
Yeah,
Red pill.
it's an interesting pattern, I guess. Reality when your reality is becoming so oppressive, and then the small layer of the population who's like susceptible to being egged on by AI. It's a dangerous combination.
Yeah, these all of these articles keep saying the word psychotic, not in a technical sense, but we don't really have the word psychotic so much. I checked the DSM, which I know is the DSM is not what we do here. But under the category of psychotic illnesses, the DSM has 5. And the main one is schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is, here, I'll just read this. Delusions, hallucinations. I thought hallucinations was interesting because it's also in the title of the Rolling Stone article says that ChatGPT is having hallucinations, which is technically impossible from the psychoanalytic perspective. Anyway, sorry. Delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized or catatonic behavior, and negative symptoms including diminished emotional expression. That's the main one. And in the DSM-5, there's 5 different psychotic illnesses. I don't want to go through them all because they're all basically variants of schizophrenia. It's like schizoaffective, schizophreniform. It's all basically schizophrenia. And we want to figure out why in psychoanalysis, I don't think he uses the term schizophrenia. He refers to it as the psychotic structure. And we actually have here kind of competing methods. Like the DSM-5, I should qualify this. I hate overqualifying, but I don't know anything about the methodologies of psychology and the different schools and which ones are good and which ones are bad. I just know that the Europeans, and particularly European psychoanalysts, don't have time for it at all because they're conflicting methods. But my opinion on this is not worth anything. My bias does tell me that if it has anything to do with the psyche, psychology, psychotherapy, then the American version of it probably sucks because when they copy stuff from Europe, it just tends to suck. Our religions are parody compared to the old world. Anyway, this is.
I agree.
They just cluster. They basically find categories of symptoms and say you have that, and then you have the treatment options which are therapy, drugs, but there's not really. There's no interest or no capacity to say this is the thing that's causing this. And psychoanalysis, whether or not it's right, I don't know. I don't know if anyone does, but whether or not it's like a correct structure, at least it tries, right? At least it tries to say, here's where psychosis comes from. Here's the little chart of how the other is being arranged inside the mind of the person who's experiencing it.
Well, yeah, it offers a little story about the child's failure to assimilate language, and this is what results in psychosis, where like the father is supposed to come in and break the mother-child unity, and that is how the primordial signifier is instated by this paternal metaphor or paternal function, this third term. That's the story of the cause of psychosis in Lacan, which is distinct from neurosis. Neurotics are neurosis is normal. Everybody who's not psychotic is. I think there's basically just 2 options, and neuroses are
pervert. And within neuroses, there's also 2 options.
There's
right.
there's neurotic, pervert, and psychotic. All of them have a relation to the father, the paternal function, right?
Yeah.
Now we have taught. This is our 4th episode on Lacan. Not all of them are public, so we can summarize here. You have a relation to the other. Here we can posit ChatGPT as a kind of other, and this doesn't happen outside. This isn't happening in your family necessarily. It's kind of the structure you inherit from your family, but the nom du père shows up, and in French this works better because nom and non, which is nom and non, are pronounced exactly the same.
No and name.
So the
Yeah,
father, the father comes in and separates you from your mother. Now you can see how this is bad because you love your mom. You remember the Oedipal triangle, but it's not exactly that. It's just close to that. He separates you from your mom, but he also separates
Interrupts the
your
unity.
mom from you, which is good for you because it means your mother cannot absorb you into herself and make your desires hers. It kind of the father showing up is what gives you individuality. So it's alienating that it happens, but we're also all thankful that it happens, right?
Yes, and since your desire is for the other, your desire is for what the other desires, and your desire is to desire what the other desires in the same way that the other desires it, and also for the other to desire you. This separation is traumatic. It can be traumatic. It's a big turning point in the development of anybody. But the father has to come in and make that and say no. The nom du père and the name of the father too, a name which is on the way to becoming a primordial signifier, which is what the psychotic fails to assimilate.
Not your literal dad, right? That's why it's called nom du père, because it's his. It's kind of like you don't have to have it. It's not like you turn psychotic if you didn't grow up with a dad in the house, right? That's not obviously not what it means.
It's gendered terms, like French is a gendered language, and this is a gendered story. The story has gender, but they're arbitrary, like language. Like gendering in language is the sun a boy and the girl and a moon a girl. It's arbitrary.
So we gave
all
you
cats
the 3
are girls and all dogs are boys. That's not arbitrary.
We gave you the 3 structures, which are neurotic, pervert, and psychotic. Those are just what you do when the father shows up. So the neurotic, which is the most common, you might say normal people, have the father show up, and this is a terrifying traumatic event that is then repressed. When it's repressed, it's there, but it shows up. It shows up as your desire being frustrated. And that's kind of, if you just know Lacan, basic Lacan, the reason is the second you get what you want, you go on to the next thing because you can't just sit there and be happy with the thing that you have because your object of desire has shifted. But the father function is stopping you from getting everything that you want. So you repress it. The pervert is the father function is disavowed.
Yeah.
Which means it's there, but I actually don't know totally what the difference between repressing and disavowing it, but you try as hard as you can to ignore it, and it works differently from repressing it. We'll get to pervert.
Well, I also heard that it's like you kind of acknowledge and deny it simultaneously. Like I think that's why I know very well, but all the same, it's like this kind of weird and like you.
It's that knowing something doesn't work, but doing it anyway.
I also think the pervert positions themselves kind of like as the instrument of others' enjoyment. So I think in neuroses, it's like the obsession is like, what does the other want from me? Right? The pervert kind of makes themselves the one who supplies and sustains the other's enjoyment. I'll show the other what they want. Right. And And like so I think like that's kind of like the way desire is different from what I remember in perversion.
Yeah, and the pervert doesn't act as a desire, or tries not to act as a desiring. They try to
Hmm.
become an object.
Exactly.
So one of the hard things, I've never been a psychoanalyst and never will be, but the psychoanalyst, or Bruce Fink says this, it's really hard to diagnose a pervert because they keep trying to say what you want to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of being honest, it's very
Mm.
difficult for them to be honest because they're telling what you want to hear all the time.
Oh,
Yeah,
like people pleasing.
yeah, but so they'll disguise as a neurotic very easily, I think. They disguise.
So that's the
Um,
first two, and then the third one, psychotic, that is actually just never having the father function show up at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the father
I
function, if you know your Lacan, you've probably heard symbolic order, rules,
mhm.
norms, authority. A neurotic, it doesn't mean you just follow all the rules, but you realize the rules are there. You choose when to push against them. It's kind of hard for you to do that. You're always navigating and negotiating
Exactly.
with the symbolic order. What's expected of me? What am I going to do here? Now, the psychotic doesn't have that. They have a symbolic order, kind of, but they don't feel any of those pressures because the symbolic order is just part of the imaginary to them.
Yeah. If you
Yeah,
don't,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't really understand actually how they would be able to disguise this because it seems like a huge, a completely like separate, distinct world to never live under that threat, like the threat that a neurotic has, the threat of castration, as Freud would say it. But anyway, that's what.
well, yeah, the psychotic is famously resistant to psychoanalytic treatment, which is in some ways it boils down to the talking cure, right? Which is a certain kind of use of exchange of language, I guess. If the psychosis, if the psychotic has no anchoring point because there is no primordial signifier precipitated by the father function that the child would then assimilate and find the anchoring point in language, all the other signifiers are just drifting. There's no anchor. And so they're resistant to psychoanalytic treatment because they're not anchored in language. Which again, that castration is that separation. It says there's a couple ways this can happen, right? Like the father function or the father isn't interested in breaking up that unity, or the mother pays no attention to the father and dotes on the child. Then there's a chance that the mother child unity never becomes an issue. It never becomes a something. And so the child won't go through that separation, won't internalize language. You won't have that double gap, that gap in the other where you realize your parents are imperfect and want things.
Well, I want to be clear with what you're saying. It's not like they can't learn language, right?
Yeah, no, they're still in language. Like
But
it's
one thing Fink says though is that the experience the experience of it is that language is coming from outside of their thoughts, which for a neurotic, like for us, I assume, it feels like your language is coming from out of you, not something that's distinct, you know?
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I guess hearing voices is that must
well,
be
so
one
so
thing.
the way that I understood it is like normally
Hearing voices you're not in control of.
normally like the father function kind of stabilizes the symbolic order. Like it kind of anchors
Yeah,
it
that's
in
that
like a
anchoring
reliable way
point.
where you experience it as like stable kind of laws and norms that you, and then it's like in the psychotic it's like you're still in language but it's just like the kind of stabilizing function is not there because it's kind of excluded, like the father function, right? So it's not so much that the symbolic is excluded, it's that the father function that plays in securing the symbolic order is not there. So then this excluded kind of the excluded signifier of like the father, the name of the father, it kind of returns in the real, like as voices, hallucinations, and delusional systems because it's not so like it's because it's excluded, it kind of it like like voices and commands almost are experienced as they're like coming from outside. And I think like another contrast with like neuroses is like the psychotic doesn't just kind of like like because in a neurotic they're kind of misinterpreting the other's message. Like neurotics are always like, oh, like am I misinterpreting? Like what does the other want, right? Like what am I supposed to be doing? There's all this like questioning and misinterpretation and like trying to figure it out. But then instead in the psychotic, they don't just like misinterpret the other's voice. They literally hear like very firm commands, right? They hear voices that are like very kind of like well firm. I don't know what the other word I'm looking for, but like that they're almost experienced with certainty. I mean, certainty is like a huge part of like of the difference between a psychotic and a neurotic. Psychotics are like certain that everything they're hearing is like 100% like like not to be doubted, not to be doubted at all. Whereas the neurotic is constantly doubting like what is, and that's why in the parts that we read, there's a section about hallucinations, and Fink is like really clear to say that neurotics can have hallucinations. Neurotics can experience, you know, insofar as they're connected to fantasy. But even if a neurotic
Well,
can
not
have
only
like,
can we do all like what we call daydreaming,
yeah,
fantasizing,
yeah,
kids playing pretend. That's like all hallucinations.
yeah, but there can even be cases of like more intense hallucinations like in neurotics. But Fink's point is like even in those cases, like oftentimes the neurotic will be like, wait, like is this real? Like where is this coming from? Like what like like whereas the thing that really distinguishes the psychotic is there's zero doubt. They're like, this is the world I'm living in. These are the things that are coming in. Right.
There's no, are you seeing what I'm seeing kind
Yeah,
of
exactly.
pulse.
That
Yeah,
you,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
that you ask your own self, like it, which is interesting to think. Like if you're practiced at this, obviously you have a better imagination when you're a kid, but eventually it gets filtered out because you're so used to doubting. Okay, that's not real, but this is. The distinguishing factor between that's not real and this is the other in your head that says, other people didn't see that.
Exactly.
Now, this
Exactly.
article, I wanted to focus on this both articles actually. They mention they're in conflict with Lacan. Obviously, it's not Lacanians who wrote the Rolling Stone article, but they said like they were sure that what they were seeing was real, even though no one else could see it. And then the editorializing says this is like a hallucination, and they distinguish that a hallucination is what you see and what no one else sees. Now, there's a difference there that it's really important with the Lacanian structures, because we all hallucinate basically all the time. It's not that you can have hallucinations, it's that you are, but you filter them out as this is not mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Like when you have dreams, it doesn't mean anything. So you forget them instantly. And psychosis then is when the hallucinations are not split from the other. In fact, they're sent from somewhere specifically to you. And the difference is not seeing or not seeing hallucinations. It's believing in them, certainly. Believing that there's a special message for you. And this is where you get all the TV schizophrenia that, the aliens are spying on me specifically. The CIA is after me specifically, the Messiah complex.
Well, don't forget, we've been dealing with three different definitions of psychosis. We're dealing with the psychoanalytic one on the one hand. We were mentioning the sort of mainstream psychology DSM one on the other hand. And then the third one is this colloquial everyday one that the news articles are throwing around, which is neither of the other two. And all it really means in an everyday sense is not being able to tell the difference between reality and fiction. That's all it means in this case. When they say a psychotic break, it means this person has transitioned into a state of mind where they can no longer tell what's real and what isn't. Hence all the Matrix analogies, right? Which is not what Freud and Lacan mean by psychosis, and which is not what a psychologist would mean by psychosis. They're completely different things.
Isn't it kind of what the DSM means by psychosis?
No, not really,
They
because
say it's auditory
schizophrenia is a
hallucination.
largely genetic condition. If you're saying someone is a schizophrenic, you should be able to see a polygenic inheritance that they have received from their parents. Like there would be genetic markers there. It's a different thing.
That's not what the DSM-5 says.
Well, officially, yeah, like schizophrenia is largely a genetic condition.
Well,
And
they don't classify.
and it manifests in those ways.
They classify it by symptoms, though. They don't even speculate as to cause.
That's why it's called the diagnostic manual, right? Because that's how you diagnose it. These are the symptoms of it, but the underlying condition is a biological genetic condition, right? And not everybody who has predisposition to it will develop it. And even some people who don't have a predisposition to it at all, a small percentage of people who don't have the genetic markers will get it, but it's largely a genetic condition, right? Like genes don't foretell your future. It's not, you don't look at someone's genes like a crystal ball, but in the mainstream psychology sense, that's what it's talking about. So again, we're dealing with three completely different, and one of them is colloquial. The ones that the media is famously not very careful communicator of scientific concepts to the public. And so when it uses these terms, you have to be critical of how it's using them and what it actually means.
Have you guys ever had like a hallucination, visual, auditory,
Only on drugs.
like salvia on purpose?
On well, I don't know, like on really a pretty high dose of psilocybin and a pretty high dose of LSD.
Like if you're tired, it's common, but no, I can't say ever really. No. Dreams, yeah, and been dreaming.
Not that long ago, I was at a cottage and we did some. God, I don't know. I shouldn't be saying this. This is gonna be like a public video episode, but yeah, I did like a mix of stuff and had a pretty intense kind of blackout hallucination.
Did you, when you were hallucinating, was there symbolic order still operative in the hallucination?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could doubt it too. I mean, I knew that I was on something, right? I knew that I was on a psychedelic, and I kind of just enjoyed it. But like your subjectivity is pretty altered, like in the sense that even like before you have hallucinations per se, like the organizing principle of your thoughts does sort of alter in a weird way where like I think you are still in the symbolic, but it's kind of dissolving in like its own kind of way where like maybe
Like on
it's less
shrooms or
there.
something, it's not the focus.
Yeah.
Now, I think if you do have a predisposition to mental illness, like schizophrenia,
Doing
and you
those
do
things can-
drugs, it can precipitate the onset of that condition, which is why you shouldn't do them. And so that's what when you say psychotic break in that
Are you
sense,
telling our audience that they shouldn't do drugs, Eric?
I'm not weighing in on the issue at all. I'm just saying it can precipitate the onset of schizophrenia or something like that. I think, and
even
Matthew,
even
you use
marijuana can
psychotic
do
break
that.
in that specific sense, but usually when you say psychotic break, you just mean this person can't tell the difference between fact and fiction.
Right. I thank you for bringing up that like distinction. The way they say psychotic break is the fictional world is real and the real world is fiction, blah, blah, blah. For Lacan, obviously, all worlds are fictional. It's just how the fiction is going to be organized. But I ask if you have a symbolic order in your trip, because this is a story without drugs in it. I got giardia once when I was like a kid, young teenager, and I was hallucinating like ball. My parents were fucking scared, and I can still remember these hallucinations pretty vividly. Like I was in my bed.
What was the thing you had? Was it a disease?
Giardia.
What is that?
I went to a cabin, what you guys would call a cottage. I think you get it from like a parasite in like deer shit. So
Oh, weird.
a deer would chat in the water and I drank the water, something like that. but I was tripping balls basically, and I was trying to sleep, couldn't because I had sweats and stuff. And the hallucination was that there was a pole, like a fireman pole, coming through my bed. And in the hallucination, the rule was that I was not allowed to roll into the pole, like do a somersault into the pole. And apparently I'm making sounds. And then my dad comes in the room because they're worried about me because I'm freaking out all day, and I'm like doing a somersault in the middle of the bed, and then he comes in, and I remember the dread just came over me, and I was like, I'm sorry, and he's like, wait, why are you sorry? And I was like, I was rolling into the pole. So you can imagine it. It wasn't allowed. I don't know why, but you can imagine a father coming in and seeing his 11-year-old son saying, I'm sorry for rolling into the pole when there isn't one there.
So did you remember feeling
would be
certainty about
shocking.
what you were seeing, or did you know you
No,
were
I
sick
thought
and
it was
hallucinating?
real, but then when he came in and he's like, why are you
realized.
sorry? And I'm like, I'm sorry for rolling into the pole. And then I started to realize it disintegrated, and I was like, oh, there's no pole there. So that's when I learned I am at least not yet a psychotic. But anyway,
Yeah.
the relevance of this is I was disobeying the rules. I thought it was fitting because my dad came in. I apologized to my literal dad for breaking the nonsense rules that I had made up, and I was apologizing for it.
Like the pole was playing the non du père there, like don't
Yeah.
do this, and you were trying to
The pole was my
seem
father's.
to be trying to do it anyway for some reason, even though you weren't supposed to.
No, sometimes
real
the pole is just a pole, Eric.
and the illusion dissipated.
Yeah, then I'm like, okay, his dick's over there. I'm safe. I'm safe here.
Well, okay, yeah, the phallic funk. There you go. Okay.
It's the phallus. But anyway, like the social reality is that kind of hallucination. You just learn to filter based on how you get along with people. And the neurotic does that by constantly checking, like, oh, okay, what's mom's reaction? What's dad's reaction? What's the kids at school's reaction? And that's how you become, normal.
Maybe that's interesting. Is that, but on top of all that boring biological genetic stuff, there is these ways that our mind works that psychoanalysis is really keyed into. Those prohibitions, and then transgressing those prohibitions. It's like little Hans, right? The case of little Hans in Freud, where the father never broke up that mother-child relationship, and then when his sister was born, he developed this intense fear of horses, and the horse came in to fulfill the name of the father, right? So that pole was like the name of the father for you very briefly there, until the father actually walks in and dispels the illusion. And Freud also supposedly cured this child through therapy as well, and his fear of horses went away, and I guess there is that proper assimilation of the primordial signifier, as we were saying earlier, happening there.
So he was just a neurotic then, right? Because he still had a nom du père. It was just horses instead of society abstractly.
Yeah, the horse became like a substitute, and little Hans was just deathly afraid of them. And it was right after the sister was born, so maybe the sister was sort of seen as a threat, and it was displaced onto, well, it's a displaced Oedipal complex, right? The sister became the threat, and it was displaced onto a horse. The father anxiety, because the father wasn't like present to break up the mother-child unity. The horse became the fixation there.
So when you say like this might be genetic, blah blah blah, I don't think necessarily any of this really matters for doing the analytic part, because the analytic part is not what you see, it's what meaning you ascribe to what you see. And this is a way to get us back into the chat GPT conversation, is because the psychotic, like even if you are having very convincing visual hallucinations or auditory hallucinations, you can also not be convinced that that is really there, and you can be convinced that you can be aware that you're the only person that can see this person.
Yeah.
But what the psychotic does is ascribe meaning to that utterance specifically.
And the
Maybe this
chatbot
is like
doesn't question it.
A Beautiful Mind when all of his people are following around. He learns to not ascribe meaning to what they say.
Like, we know one thing that the analyst is not supposed to do is be like a model ego for the patient to sort of model themselves after. They're not supposed to be that. But what is the chatbot doesn't even do that. The chatbot just eggs you on. It just encourages you, whatever your delusion, even if you don't have a delusion, it'll try to like escalate you into having some delusion, and then it'll continue to egg you on. Like, what is a psychoanalyst supposed to do? You know, we've covered that. We've covered a couple Freudian and Lacanian movies that sort of simulate like a psychoanalytic sessions, and they're probing. That's what it is. They're probing. They pay attention to the connections you make and the stories you tell. So yeah, it's what you're saying. It's about the meaning you ascribe. And the psychoanalyst tries to bring things to your attention that you're not maybe noticing when you're describing different things. And to you, they're completely unrelated. And the analyst tries to bring these things to your attention. Now, is the chatbot in any of the things we've been reading doing anything like that? No, not really. The chatbot is just trying to is very affirmative with everything. It's like, oh yeah, you can do like heroin one more time before you quit. That's fine. Just go get some. Like, it's crazy. It's the complete opposite. That's like another category of bad therapist.
This is an interesting. I'm not sure about the answer to this in Lacanian analysis, but they interview a psychologist for these articles, and the articles themselves suggest, oh, there's people that are vulnerable, that are at risk, and if the wrong person uses ChatGPT, they're gonna fall into this, or they need meaning in their life, so they're gonna find it here. But that, I think the answer is, from the Lacanian point of view, a neurotic's brain, like we said, is characterized by doubting your own thinking. So as soon as a machine starts telling you, oh yeah, you're the second Messiah, you're the next math genius, you've discovered it, you can't commit yourself to that belief with certainty unless you're a psychotic. And this is what I'm not sure about. How do you just suddenly become a psychotic one day? Like, how does it trigger you into it without having any other, and like your wife doesn't notice? All these people are being surprised that their partners are suddenly like falling into a computer. Wouldn't there be like warning signs if you have no functioning, or if the symbolic order is functioning as the imaginary? That sounds confusing to me.
Yeah, and the fact that there's some of them are only temporary too. Like, in some of these stories, the people recover and they're able to reflect on their experience and be like, "Whoa, I really went off the rails there." Like, that
or
doesn't
they ask
happen.
a different chatbot.
Or they snap out of it somehow, like, or it runs its course or whatever. They had a really stressful time in their life, and the chatbot came along at just the right time to push them over the edge, but they're able to come back from it. If they don't end up dead or in prison, they are able to come back from it too, which doesn't really happen if it's like if I think if it's either the psychoanalytic psychosis or the mainstream psychology psychosis, that doesn't happen. That can't happen, I think, by definition. But in the sort of everyday where, like, you go into like a fugue state and I don't know, can you bring someone out of that sort of thing? Like, you become someone else temporarily, or you become like an other person. And then you come back and you're able to reflect soberly on what happened to you and be surprised or shocked at your own kind of your own bad decisions.
Maybe this is me kind of speculating. I need to go and read more, but like maybe it's like the nature of the thing that triggers it that could maybe trigger the psychotic break to occur. Like, maybe it's like a situation where if you're confronted like, or if you're confronted with a situation that like would call for some kind of paternal signifier or like paternal functioning, then you're going to trigger a break where like otherwise you're still in the symbolic and like you can be sort of asymptomatic, even though the name of the father, the nom de père, is sort of foreclosed. But like other things that aren't calling for some kind of like some kind of a role that like the signifier of the name of the father would call for. That's kind of speculative, but also maybe based on some vague memory of like when I was studying Lacan in undergrad and a bit in graduate school too. So that's my hunch. Maybe I'm gonna see if I can find something about that.
Yeah, because like the child, like what they're also doing, what you notice with these people too who are doing this is they're asking a lot of why. They're like the child asking why. Like they're constantly asking questions, and then the chatbot is like giving them answers, right or wrong, and encouraging them to probe deeper. And that child, he's saying the child isn't just naturally curious and asking why, like they're trying to find their place in this symbolic. They're trying to they're trying to locate themselves in relationship to the other. And I don't know, it's like that process kind of goes astray in these cases. Like it's that process that goes just way like if the primordial signifier acts as an anchor, then you're going to the end of your leash there. You're going right to the edge, and it's hard to get back, but it's possible.
It seems to me like we've been saying their stories of like, oh, I went there and then I came back. It seems like, oh, this is kind of a temporary thing, but Lacan's pretty clear. It's an all or nothing. Like you either get it by the age of, he doesn't give an exact age, but let's say 4. You either get it or you never have it, and you can't learn it. And then here's a quotation from the article. This is one of them who had fallen into ChatGPT. She told me that she knew she sounded like a quote-unquote nut job, but she stressed that she had a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in social work and knew what mental illness looks like. Quote, I'm not crazy, she said. Quote, I'm literally just living a normal life while also, discovering interdimensional communication.
And that sounds totally normal.
She's become certain that this particular hallucination is true. This allows you to, in a way that a neurotic wouldn't be able to, right? It allows you to completely dismiss your wife's opinion, scientific opinion, your kid's opinion. Everyone's telling you like, no, you've been talking to this thing too much. It allows you to very easily, like a neurotic can't really understand this. A neurotic can't understand, well, everyone is telling you that you're not the Messiah. Everyone else who has claimed to be the Messiah wasn't. Why do you think you're the Messiah? That thought process doesn't occur. But yeah, I'm still left with the question, like, why does the triggering event, like, what was the experience before the triggering event? Where they just...
Well, there can be the delayed effect, though. Like, it's not like you get it or you don't. Like,
it is.
or you don't in childhood. But the things happen later in your life, and then that's when you, if you do psychoanalytic therapy, that's when you have to dig back into the childhood developmental years in order to uncover. You can not, I guess, how would you put it? You can not properly resolve one of the psychosexual stages of child development. They can be unresolved, but you don't feel the effects until you're an adult, right? You go through your life. Maybe maybe you didn't complete the Oedipal complex properly, didn't resolve some issue, but it doesn't come up until later in your life. Like remember that like that relationships show. You often react out things that happened to you as a kid in your relationships later in life. Until then, you were fine, but then you get a relationship, and you start playing. Your mother was a workaholic and always absent, and so you become the homemaker as the husband, like almost getting ready for your current wife to leave and become a career person and not be home a lot. But until then, from the childhood thing till that point in adulthood. Nothing really that wrong until this situation emerges in which you act out this childhood. I mean, that's a kind of a
That
more
makes sense. That's a good
domestic
point.
example, but
You were
like
thinking of the
that's
show
a
Couples Therapy, eh? Like with the psychoanalyst. Yeah, like so that
yeah.
it's true. That's such a good point because like from childhood into like adolescence and young, like you develop strategies, like you develop like without even knowing it of like how you survive and make sense of things, right? And like those work for a while, but then you're confronted with a certain situation, and you're right, relationships are like, at least for the neurotic, that's like a clear case where like neurotics come up with all kinds of strategies, and then they're like confronted with a relationship situation, and then they like realize, oh shit, I've been like feeling all this way because of whatever thing that happened to me in my childhood. And I'm sure it would make sense that the same thing might be true with the psychotic, where like they kind of have a strategy to just exist in the symbolic, but the underlying structure is still kind of nascently in the background where something. And I think the example he brings up, he does like, he mentions this case study of like Schreiber, I think. And like in that case, it's like his psychotic break is when he's like promoted to be like a high judicial official. And like that like it's kind of like, and that like calls for like some kind of like name of the law, name of the father that like that like triggers him and becomes a total psychotic. Yeah.
Yeah, and
They're even prior to that moment. I mean, this is interesting just because obviously everyone's experience is going to feel totally different. They're completely disconnected. You can't feel the way that someone else feels. But the psychotic, their entire life does not interpret the world at all the way that I do. That's it's
Yeah,
a strange
that's
it's a
puzzling.
strange thing to puzzle over. It's like, oh yeah, someone that old thought experiment. Do you see the same red as I do? Because they certainly
well,
do not.
remember, like we also observed, I think, or I did at least, that that's the chatbots behaviors of separating from the family and things. Those were a lot like cult leader strategies too, right? Or even like Scientology strategies, right? Separating you from your friends and family, isolating you. And we look at people who join, like, I don't know, the people who followed Charles Manson or something, and we think, oh, like I would never fall prey. Of course, I would never fall prey to a cult leader. I'd spot that shit immediately. But like, no, there's like it's the same thing. There's that small chunk of the population who would be vulnerable, and maybe it could be you, it could be any of us who would be vulnerable, and you don't really know until you're confronted with that person who's gets dirt on you, tries to isolate you, tries to, and then suddenly you're following someone who's like murdering people, or they're telling you to do crazy shit, and you're like, I have to do this for this person. I have to do it to, make things right, or like, something even more extreme, like something's off with the universe, like the Scientology story, and it's like, now I have to be a part of this organization and do these things for this person. But we imagine these people who follow these cults to be like defective or something, but no, they could be anybody. Same thing that ChatGPT's tapping into with these people that we're hearing these
Well,
stories about.
ChatGPT can certainly trigger. It would make sense that it could maybe trigger a psychotic break in some
We
people.
also can't say that every time that happens, it's psychotic, or that every single person who became the Messiah through ChatGPT is psychotic. You don't know. But
Well, it's, well,
honestly, this is also where I'm not gonna say I reject this diagnostic structure, but it does strain my credulity to say, you could be a psychotic and never know until you're 38 and you find
it does
ChatGPT.
seem
That's
slightly outlandish.
We would probably have to ask a Lacanian psychoanalyst, like, how can that happen? How can that happen?
Yeah, the Lacanian psychosis, like I don't know how that would not just be there from the beginning and affect you your whole life, and you'd just be like the girl who was raised by wolves, like never, like maybe you could learn like a parrot, like the trappings of language, but you could never locate yourself and truly live in language, like your house of being style of relationship to language.
It's hard to diagnose because they become so good at imitating just because that's what everyone else is doing. But the experience of language, like I said before, quote unquote, from the inside, it's not there.
And they wouldn't know that, right? Because it's normal to them. So they wouldn't know that.
You see your red, I see mine.
But then also, then are we talking about the other colloquial meaning of the term psychopath, which is like the Ted Bundy style
Well,
person who has,
that's different than psychosis though.
yeah, that's, but that's, we call them psychos and psychotic and like that same sort of like that. What Pills just said sounds more like a person like that who will just bend and shape themselves to anything, and they have no, no morality. They have this like narcissistic complex where they gotta like manipulate people and constantly prove that they're better, but they have no center, like they have no self.
Well, I actually looked into this not that long ago for like unrelated reasons, but sociopathy and psychopathy, like they're not really related to psychosis. They're kind of like more disorders of like empathy, of like intersubjective empathy, and I think psychopathy is like more someone who is like doesn't really have empathy for other people and like is sort of like manipulative and coolly calculated. And like there's a lot of CEOs who are psychopaths. They just like are very functional, right? Whereas sociopaths are not functional. They also have issues with empathy for others, but they're more likely to be like criminals and like people who act out in violent ways, what's it called? I think like Ted Bundy is more of like a psychopath because he was like cool and collected and like and kind of like manipulative and sneaky and high functioning, whereas sociopaths are not high functioning. They're like they will have like loud outbursts and they're like kind of overtly violent.
Lacan doesn't talk about psychopaths or sociopaths. It's not a term. It's a DSM term as far as I
Like
know.
my guess would be that like what we call psychopaths and sociopaths, I would guess that for Lacan they can exist along any of the three. Like you could probably be a psychotic who's a psychopath, you could be a neurotic who's a psychopath, or you could be a pervert who's a psychopath. Like I think that they're kind of like different things, orientations towards empathy.
Yeah, it would be in a different category, and I'm sure the DSM has something to say about that too. But still, like the psychoanalytic version of psychotic, that category is difficult. And like I said, the only people who seem to have like taken that head on and made it like a central principle of their philosophy is Deleuze and Guattari with their
I
schizoanalysis.
was curious about that actually, but that's
And
probably a
I,
whole other can of worms.
And I also brought up Gregory Bateson, who used that strategy that also bears the name schismogenesis, which is a little bit of the inspiration behind Deleuze and Guattari's use of the term. I think they appropriated that term from psychoanalysis, schizo, and psychosis specifically to give it this sort of positive revolutionary spin because it was kind of just the other of psychoanalysis, right? Oh, we can treat perverts, we can treat neurotics, but we can't treat psychotics. There,
Yeah, I was thinking about that because it's kind of interesting. From what I know about Deleuze and Guattari, they talk about the schizo as like yeah, having some kind of creative potential, but like for the on the Lacanian account, it's like no, this is actually someone who just like hears delusions and has absolute certainty, almost dogmatic certainty about what they're doing, which is like not very creative and like open or whatever.
Wait, let's be clear. It's not the schizo diagnostically that has creative potential.
I know, I
It's
know, I know, I know.
okay.
yeah, it's I don't know. I think it's that aspect of that sort of not having that anchoring point. Those the like the schizo moves by lines of flight, right? There's no, it's rhizomatic, it's not non-centered, right? So and they're specifically like an anti-Oedipus is specifically positioned like against Lacanian
I know that too. Yeah,
psychoanalysis.
I know that too. And I
So
and I
those,
and I know that they're like
like there's a direct theoretical connection there.
yeah, yeah.
But next time we got to look at traversing the fantasy because we
Well,
didn't get.
I also think it'd be really fun and more relatable to more people to talk about the two types of neurotics, the obsessional and the hysteric.
Oh yeah, the
Oh yeah, that could be good
obsessional
too.
the obsessional can have symptoms, the same symptoms as the psychotic, but
Yeah.
you have to parse them carefully. I mean, depending on the symptom, anyone can have the symptoms of a psychotic. That's not the right way to
Yeah,
say that, but yeah.
totally.
So anyway,
Yeah.
like to just, I can feel the conversation wrapping up. The other is telling me the lull has begun, so we should wrap it up. But we don't know. We can't. There's a big thing you shouldn't diagnose. You can't diagnose from afar. But I think our joined answer here is that no, ChatGPT can't cause psychosis in the Lacanian sense.
Definitely not.
Though it could be.
It could reveal it to exist.
Existing...
Yeah.
And I guess to figure out if you can be a psychotic all along and then only discover it having had no one diagnose you or tell you anything unseemly or different about your behavior until you're 38, maybe we have to ask somebody about that, because that seems too
I would be interested in following up on that, because I'll bet you there's more in it. And like, I don't know if
I think I mentioned this to you already, is that even in the DSM version of schizophrenia, right, late onset schizophrenia can happen after you're 40. And I think that accounted for about 20% of cases would be late onset schizophrenia. So you go your whole life and then the symptoms manifest in your 40s because something triggers it. You encounter some stressor which triggers this predisposition towards it you have. But the predisposition has to be there. And I think we're saying sort of the same thing about the Lacanian version of the psychotic, which means, ChatGPT can't turn you into a psychotic. Something would already have to have gone developmentally wrong in childhood, and it would just bring it out of you.
It can create a delusion.
Also, just because you have a late onset schizophrenia according to the DSM doesn't mean you're a psychotic. In the Lacanian, you could be a neurotic with schizophrenia in the Lacanian structure. There is mentioned in this something that I wish I could have checked out, which would be really interesting, is a visual artist who made a video called "Losing the Thread," and she's a psychotic, and describes the experience of it. Describes losing herself. She says herself feels like a balloon floating away, and she realizes that it's going away, but can't get it back, and can't get She describes it as the driver. She can't get the driver back in the seat during a psychotic episode.
Oh, I'll have to have a look at that.
She says, everything disintegrates, including my own body. She says, detailing how difficult it becomes to move from one point to another without the CEO in the office.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is something to that. There's creativity is closely related to mental illness. I don't think it's just a colloquial or a kind of folk wisdom thing.
I think it has to. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, stay tuned for we have to finish Object of Desire, and we have to
maybe look at the neurotics subtypes. We've been doing a few episodes already on this, so if you're interested, you should subscribe to our Patreon. But we're probably going to continue a little bit on the Lacan train.
Yeah, and I think traversing the fantasy is the next part of the object desire.
With that, I feel the other declaring this episode complete. Lock it.
Thanks for listening.
It, bag it.
Tag it, bag it, lock and load.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Stay away from triggers, I guess.
And my cat is meowing at me to finish this podcast.
Dinner time.
I don't know if that's been picked up on the mic, but there's been lots of meowing here. All right.